I love Deerfield and am thrilled that Robert Strong Woodward has landed, a great painter and a great show. Janet asked me to give some background and explanation for Woodward's work and times, that moment in American art when New England ruled. Like most people, I'd never heard of Robert Strong Woodward until a couple years ago, but this magnificent exhibition in Buckland, Massachusetts in September of 2010 changed all that. Janet and the fans of Robert Strong Woodward have been collecting images and now have identified several hundred pictures that he painted during a prolific career in the 1930s through 40s. One of the best things about the Woodward legacy is this extraordinary archive that really gives us a window into the world of the art scene in New England in the era before World War II. What's exciting about Woodward is that he widens our perspective on the art movement of that period beyond the very narrow definition of American Impressionism and the couple dozen artists typically associated with that. Shown here is work from the old Lyme School, and of course the Florence Griswold Museum in Lyme, Connecticut is one of the beachheads for American Impressionism, and many famous artists painted there, but they are really just the tip of the iceberg. The Bush Holly House Museum in the Coscop section of Greenwich in nearby Silvermine, Connecticut, attracted some of the iconic figures in American Impressionism, like Child Hassam and John Twachtman. Ogunquit, Maine, and nearby Gloucester, Massachusetts, shown here, attracted hundreds of artists. You almost get the impression it might have been hard to find a place to set up an easel in 1915. Setting up an easel or plein air painting is what it was all about, painting outdoors in nature surrounded by the historical, cultural, and natural environment that so inspired these New Englanders. A Monhegan Island in Maine, shown here, became one of the most popular artist destinations. The literature on what I prefer to call the New England art movement is abundant, and most of it focuses on these so-called art colonies. But in fact, by 1920, most of the energies in the art movement were in these annual shows and exhibit facilities from Chicago to New York, but also in places like Albany, Stockbridge, Ogunquit, Springfield, Mass., and elsewhere. No matter who the artist or where the location in New England, much of the subject matter was similar in that these artists were fascinated again by the natural environment, by the changing of seasons, and by this ambiance of history that New England was so rich for. Wonderful images like these show historic buildings in various parts of New England. What could be more New England than the iconic meeting house and church? Many of the artists set up their easels in front of them and captured them on beautiful fall days and with varying light and texture. Many of these artists made their reputations capturing the essence of winter, New England's most emblematic season. Aldro Hubbard, Dwight Blaney, Willard Metcalf, Walter Palmer, and others. Imagine the excitement in 1924 when Arthur Wilder captured the scene of Calvin Coolidge's birthplace. A New England president in the White House? What could have been more exciting than that in the 1920s? The essence of the movement was seasonality and weather and scouting out those great locations that would capture a sense of place. New England city life was also a popular theme. Shown here are views of Hartford and Boston, Massachusetts. The artists also depicted subjects that conveyed the dignity of work through traditional occupations, trades, and domestic arts. Coursing through the New England landscape are thousands of brooks, streams, and rivers. Imagine setting up your canvas to paint here. Mill streams and factories were popular subject matter. The famous Impressionist J. Alden Weir had family connections in the town of Willimantic, shown here. Gardening soared in popularity during this period. Florence Griswold in Old Lyme had a famous garden, as did Thelia Thaxter on the Isle of Shoals in New Hampshire, which Child Hassam liked to paint. The New England art movement coincided with the first golden age of antiques collecting. Shown here by Abbott Graves is a pottery restorer and an antique shop. Although the movement began in the 1880s toward the end of the French Impressionist era, it continued into the advent of modernism, and there were several famous artists like Marston Hartley, Charles Sheeler, and Rockwell Kent who also participated in this capturing sense of place in historic New England. During the Great Depression, President Roosevelt put artists to work in a program known as the Federal Art Project that embellished courthouses, schools, post offices, and other public buildings with amazing historical and scenic murals capturing, again, that distinctive sense of New England place. The fact is, for every artist noted in surveys of American art, there are probably 10 that did extraordinary work who we are just now discovering. Here is Max Delfont from New Haven. He wasn't a member of an art colony, he didn't participate in the big New York shows, but he had this wonderful studio and produced excellent work that is well worth appreciating and paying attention. Another New Havener, George Thompson, painted these little oils of New Haven Green, James Hillhouse's Sachem's Wood Mansion, Lighthouse Point, and East Rock. The marketing and display of art in this period was still kind of a boys' club. A lot of the women artists were excluded, and yet probably half the paintings and half the painters produced in the New England art movement were by women like Mary Clark, shown here. Margaret Cooper and Mabel English were two Hartford women who exhibited widely. Their work merits renewed attention. Harriet Loomis from Springfield, Massachusetts, developed a prolific following in her time. Here are some of her great works. Anna Miner from Waterford, Connecticut, not only exhibited nationally, but she was the national regent of the Daughters of the American Revolution and lectured all around the country on patriotism and American values. Here are views by Jane Peterson from Gloucester, Marie Alexander's view of the Cheapside Bridge in Deerfield, and Pauline Palmer's studio. Painters weren't the only artists to participate in the New England art movement. One of the most famous, Wallace Nutting, produced this book of exquisite photographs of New England scenery in 1912. Wallace Nutting loved New England's winding road and spring cherry blossoms. In the upper left is his home in Southbury, Connecticut, and in the lower left is his wife's ancestral home in Buckland, Massachusetts. Wallace Nutting became especially famous for his staged colonial interiors shown here, and also for the series of books on the states beautiful. New England, states like Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Vermont got the full treatment. Francis and Mary Allen of Deerfield developed a national reputation for their ethereal, evocative photographs. Another photographer who developed a national reputation at the time but has been forgotten is Amasdae Chaffee of East Haddam, Connecticut, shown here. Thomas Nason, also of East Haddam, was a printmaker who developed a national reputation. The upper left is a scene of Deerfield that he produced in the 1930s. The New England art scene is what it was all about. During the period from about 1880 to 1950, New England epitomized American tradition, American values, and American beauty. Pictures of New England, whether major works by celebrity artists or mass-produced art photographs by Wallace Nutting, filled homes coast to coast. Artists from other regions flocked here to paint, etch, and take photographs. It was an age of resurgent New Englandism that produced Robert Frost and a torrent of regional art and literature. It was good for the historic preservation and good for the country. After World War II, artists steered away from place, past, and environment, concerns that are again front and center as our society grapples with issues of sustainability. Looking back, Robert Strong Woodward's passion for place, deep observation, and gift for composition and representation are an inspiration to cherish. Enjoy the exhibit and enjoy Memorial Hall in Deerfield.